Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Unfinished Business Podcast, a podcast for veterans pursuing new life missions. This podcast is sponsored and powered by American Coffee and Tea. If you've never been to American Coffee and Tea, they are located in Frisco, Texas. They are a veteran-owned shop that serves veteran-owned coffee and tea. Today's guest is Paul Slough. Paul Slough is a true American hero. His bravery and selflessness during his service in the United States Army from 1999 to 2007 will never be forgotten. He's been deployed to some of the world's most dangerous places, Bosnia and Iraq, as an infantryman, sacrificing his own safety to protect the freedom we hold so dear. After his honorable discharge from the United States Army, he went to work for the Department of State through a subcontractor, Blackwater International, and was unjustly accused of a war crime, imprisoned for 6 years, along with 3 other decorated veterans, until President Trump stepped in and pardoned them in December 2020. Today, Paul's mission for serving others extends far beyond his military service as he continues to give back to his community through organizations such as the Rotary Club, American Legion, the Denton County Republican Veteran Club, and the Denton County Republican Veteran Club. He is also a shining light in the Blackwater Memorial Alumni Association, inspiring others as an area manager for State Senate District 30 under the Honorable Drew Springer, who stood by him through thick and thin as a friend and an advocate. Today, Paul's unwavering courage and selflessness serve as a testament to the human spirit and a reminder to all of us of what it means to be a true hero. Paul's story promises to shed some light on some of the tough decisions and struggles servicemen and women face when they find themselves in the midst of an international conflict. Paul, it's a pleasure to meet you, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
And thank you to American Coffee and Tea. Wow.
Yes, I agree.
Cool.
Yeah, you know, Judy's a fantastic friend of mine, and she shared a little bit of your story, and I said, well, let's see what we can do to hear what he has to say about his experience, and so we're lucky to have you today, for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You know, before we get started, I want to make sure I say this, is that because there are so many dimensions and aspects to your experience and story, I don't want to create a facade that we can possibly cover it in an hour, because I think you and I both know it would be virtually impossible to do. That's not to say I'm not game for an extended interview, because I am, but I want to be mindful to the people that are here to listen, okay?
Sure.
All right, so before we begin, describe Blackwater International, what Blackwater International is, and why you chose to become a private contractor with them.
So for me, my biggest driver for working for them was, at the time I was in the National Guard, and we had just come back from Iraq. And I was working a 9 to 5 at a big box store, and it wasn't a good fit. The mission was still going on. It was, in my mind, incomplete. And so for me, I wanted to get back into the mission of what I believe to be the end game for reconstituting the country of Iraq, because they had been under such an oppressive regime for so long that, for me, and I don't mean to speak for anybody else, it was an actual effort to help a people reclaim their nation.
Yeah.
And so in order to be a part of that, honestly, I went to a job fair in Dallas, Texas, and lo and behold, there was representation there from Blackwater, and we'd heard the name being in the country, but we didn't really know their mission. We didn't really know what they were about. And so in speaking with the recruiter, he really let me in on kind of what the main mission was and what they were after, and who they were looking for. And so I submitted my application, continued that conversation, and got accepted to be vetted in Moyoc, which was, the first thing that you did before you obviously deployed.
Yeah.
Show up to Moyoc. It was about 3.5 weeks of some of the most intense training and exercises that I've experienced, with some of the most top-tier candidates from across the military. And so in reality, I felt really overwhelmed and underqualified given the talent that was there. But nevertheless, I continued forward and worked through the process and got to the end, and apparently was successful. And so they deployed us and went to work for the Department of State through that company.
Wow. What was the spirit like with Blackwater International, like as a team? Speak to that a little bit.
Well, so, that's a good question, because there were so many people from DevGru, from the SEALs, from Ranger Battalion, from SF, you name it, the entire spectrum of all of our special operations. And it was a community of people that truly believed in the spirit of America, in the context of raising up that next generation. And so it was really a collaborative environment where anybody that wanted to learn, wanted to increase their skill set, had every opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And it was largely dependent on the individual's attitude, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a bunch of A-types, but typically people with egos were jet launched out of there pretty quick.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
For those that are unfamiliar, most of your story revolves around the events that occurred as a private contractor under Blackwater International at the Suar Square in Baghdad, Iraq in 2007. Before you tell me what happened that day, what was your primary mission on that day?
So our mission that day was, we were a TST team, which simply means tactical support.
Yeah.
We were the 911 to our other teams that were out and about, whether they were low pro, whether they were high vis, it didn't really matter. And we had 3 different TST teams. We were secondary that day, so you had primary, secondary, tertiary.
Okay.
And then of course you had your air assets. But our primary mission was to be a backup to the primary. We were sitting, maybe I'm getting outside of the scope of your question here, but
Go right ahead.
kind of transition into.
Yeah.
So we were sitting in the chow hall, and we heard the giant explosion go off, which at that point in time was a non-event. I mean, we were averaging 180 attacks a day in that environment, and they said that it was 2007 was the bloodiest, most aggressive year of the war.
Yeah.
So it really didn't even register on our radar until it came over the radio, contact, and so we knew a team that primary was overseeing was under contact, but for us that meant get to the trucks, because more than likely we're going to be called into that.
Yeah.
And so they had been hit with a vehicle-borne IED, followed on with small arms fire, and we responded to it.
Yeah. That was my next question. What actions were taken? Or like what actions did you take? You responded and like.
Yeah, so we got to the gate, stood by, waited for the call to go. There's been some controversy around that, whether we were actually supposed to leave the gate or not. We weren't part of the conversation on the cell phone that our shift lead had at the time, so we just understood the radio traffic, and we were hearing what was going on, so we were preparing for what we thought was a fight.
Yeah.
And so we eventually launch. We get to the actual square, which was a circle, and that was to be their route coming back. That was the shortest route for the low pro team to get back into the international zone, or the IZ.
Yeah.
And so it was our understanding that we were to lock that down so that they could get in without any issue.
So okay, so when actions were made, what incited that, for the response? Like, what were you experiencing? If you can give us a brief detail with that.
Yeah, so we were coming into the square, and there was a large presence of Iraqi police and Iraqi National Guard, which was weird for that time of day in that area. And if you live in a specific area, you know what's on and what's off, right?
Yeah.
Even in your own home, that particular item's not supposed to be there. There's something wrong. It was that type of sense. So we pull into the square, traffic stops, and it was just an eerie silence. And immediately all of your spidey senses go up. Now that morning we had a briefing, as we did every morning, of be on the lookout list for certain vehicles, for certain individuals. And it just so happened that there was a white Kia that morning on our BOLO list in the area that was supposed to be a vehicle-borne IED. And the way those were implemented were they were simply driven into a convoy or into an area and meant to explode and kill people. As a matter of fact, the Nasir Square months previous had just had another one go off underneath it, and so it was in the middle of reconstruction.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we pull in, traffic stops, and there was a white Kia that punched out of the traffic. Everybody was hollering, screaming, throwing water bottles, throwing pin flares, and it didn't stop. So my response was to engage, and then that seemed to set off the entire ambush that was set up for low-pro vehicles coming through. And I think that was one of the things that the prosecution really glibly overlooked, was the fact that there was a two-way gunfight. And later in our appellate hearing, the government admitted to it. When in our entire trial, there was no enemy combatants.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for sharing that. You know, before I asked you the question, I should have said, hey, if you feel compelled to share it. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Well, what came out of the actions, right? You and 3 others were charged and convicted of voluntary and attempted murder. What were some of your thoughts that went through your mind when you heard that you were being charged in the first charge, and then, after that, convicted by it?
It was a disbelief that I can't quantify in the English language.
Yeah.
In the Greek, there's a term skotia, which means darkness, and it's a darkness that it's palatable. You can feel it. And it was unbelief, and then the fact that my entire statement was released to the press was even more baffling. So yeah, it was, and it still is a disbelief that actually occurred. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. What were some of the things you learned about the legal process regarding the case, including your trial and sentencing? That
while I believe we have the best system in the world, to quote Winston Churchill, it's still not perfect, but it's a great system. We were effectively the meat on the hook because Henry Waxman and the rest couldn't get the owner of our company on any type of, really anything. And so there was an effort in our minds to not only shut down the company, but to vilify people who were, number one, successful. We never once lost a principal, and not even the Secret Service can say that. We never lost a principal. We never had a principal injured, and the op tempo in that particular area was beyond anything I've experienced since. And so, in my view, and I don't think I'm the only one in this, we effectively embarrassed the biggest fighting force with a leaner budget, a smaller footprint, and a greater success rate.
Wow. So the legal system, what specifically did you feel was fractured about your experience? So I see this has happened to me. It's not. This isn't justifiable in my eyes, right? When you look at that, what do you speak to? What would you speak to?
So once Judge Urbina threw the first case out in 2009,
which case? What case?
That was our first trial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So Judge Ricardo Urbina had tossed it out after a 3-week Castigar hearing, and a Castigar hearing is simply evidentiary hearing, right? To figure out what evidence has been tainted, if there's a chain of custody, all these different issues.
Okay.
And so when Judge Urbina threw it out with the opinion, all of us were like, wow, okay, justice system actually works, right? Because he cited, not only were we, and I have to go back and read the opinion, but it was that our constitutional rights had been completely obfuscated. So once that opinion came out, all of us said, okay, wow, now we can go back to work. Now things can go back to normal, and we can go back to our mission.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. There was superseding indictments that came out right before the primaries of Barack Obama's second term. Right after Judge Urbina had thrown it out, then Vice President Biden had gone over to Vice President Talabani's and announced that a dismissal was not an acquittal, and that the United States government would absolutely appeal it and bring it back. And they did.
Yeah, that was the one thing when I was doing my research that really kind of blew my mind. You threw it out, and then Biden went in and said, no, we're gonna we're gonna do this again. When you got that news, where were you? What were you doing at that time?
I was actually on the back of my gray mare. We were living in Gainesville, and I was working for a ranch up there. And I was on my gray horse doing my rounds, checking cows, and I got the call from my attorney. Said, "Hey, they brought it back, and superseding indictments are coming, and wanted to give you a heads up." And we had a suspicion that it may come to that, but now it was reality, and that again that darkness set in, and it was complete confusion.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, to answer that was where I was.
You served 6 years, right, in prison.
Yep.
Do you feel a sense of betrayal, like, by the government you served?
Sure, that exists, but there, in my time in prison, there was a real wrestling with God, a real wrestling with this sense of a just God being in the midst of an unjust system in a broken and fallen world. How do you reconcile that? And in our cognitive abilities, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Right? And so, in those moments, crying out to Him, saying, "How, frankly, how in the hell can you allow this to happen? Who are you?"
Yeah.
And I came to the conclusion: if you're real and you really are who you say you are, show me myself through your eyes without your Son. And that'll be a statement I'll never make again, because He did.
Yeah. When you were there, you have that real alone time with God, right? That's what I say. This is real alone time with God. What transformative about you happened? I know that kind of experience tends to transform people. They transcend or descend, right?
Sure.
What was your transformational experience?
So it's a big tapestry, right? It wasn't a singular moment. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was a series of events. And I started reading a lot of the writings of Paul, because, as the story goes, Paul was in prison as well. Completely different reasons, but I knew that there had to be some type of harmony there. If God would do that for His Son there, and according to your word, you say, "I'm your son," help me unpack this, help me figure this out, because it's so far above my pay grade that we were considered disposable. We accepted the fact that we were expendable, right? We all had this concept of, all right, I'm not going home, that's fine, because the mission is more important.
Yeah.
But now the reality was made absolutely clear that not really.
Yeah.
Not really. So I said, okay, what is my identity? Who do I belong to? What is the construct of all of this? And how do I navigate an environment I've never even been in? I've heard about it. I've seen movies about it. But I've never even known anybody that's been to prison.
Yeah.
So much less, how would you know how to navigate a system like that? So
Yeah.
it was a big story. It was a length of time that now feels like, a twinkling of an eye, but at the time it felt like eternity. And so, again, I'm being kind of long-winded here, but
No, that's good. No.
connecting with Him and realizing that's a real tangible relationship and not just somebody I'm reading about in a book. He brought that point home, and when I frankly was on a prison floor crying out for mercy, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't live with my own sin, knowing the consequence of it and realizing that I need a Savior, right?
Yeah.
And for me, that Savior is a man from Nazareth. Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. Was there a biblical quote that carried you through? Like,
Be steadfast.
be steadfast.
Be steadfast.
Okay.
Paul said it in 1 Corinthians 15:53, be steadfast. And this was a man who cried out to God multiple times, remove this thorn from my side, right? We all know the story, and different pastors do different things with it. But in my mind, that's a moment in time when Paul was crying out to his God, saying, remove this thorn, because it was, in my view, past memories. It wasn't a physical ailment. It anything that was in the flesh. It was Paul's psyche, and I think the Greek even uses that. Remove this thorn. And he said, no. He said, through your weakness, my strength is made perfect.
Wow. That's that omnipotence, right? That you experience in that that deep skin relationship that you were able to establish from that experience, from that.
And there were so many times where my wife and I took a trip once to Rome back when I was contracting, and we'd gone through Mamertine prison. And that's where a lot of scholars say that's probably where Paul was. And when you stand on the footsteps and you look out, you can see the ruins of the circus. And that would have been the time when Nero was using Christians as, entertainment.
Yeah.
And so Paul, even being in Mamertine prison, when writing these letters of, respect authority and things of that nature, he was hearing the cheers of Romans as his brothers and sisters were being used as entertainment. But again, it goes back to he had the kingdom and eternal mindset versus the here and now.
Wow. How have your experiences as a contractor and the time you did in prison impact your views on private military contracting and the use of contractors in conflicting zones or conflict zones?
It impacted it in the context of it seems, and this is purely my opinion, it seems that contractors in this day and age are in a sense used as scapegoats when things go wrong. And that sounds like a really bold and arrogant statement, but when you look at the context of our case, and even some soldiers that are currently in prison through the military, Calvin Gibbs is one of them. He was accused of 3 murders, 2 of which he wasn't even there for, and there was another guy that said, no, I was engaged in the same combatant. Where I'm going with that is we live in a broken world, and we are not perfect. And just because there's bad apples in certain contexts, it doesn't mean the entire system is broken and flawed and it needs to be done away with. That's not at all what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is Jeremiah 17:9 says, the heart of man, who can know it? Ultimately, that's where it comes from, is people's hearts and their intents. Whatever positions of power that they're in, are they using that for the benefit of their constituents and the benefit of the nation, or is it purely arrogance and hubris?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a big question, huh? Do you think that question's been answered yet?
Yeah, it's going to be answered in finality whenever time ends, right?
Okay.
And so for me, there's been the constant question: do you have any bitterness? Do you have any regret? Do you have any anger? Well, sure, I'm a human being.
Yeah.
And our emotions can really span the spectrum. But what I come down to in the final answer is, I belong to Him. Fear not, right?
Yeah.
As Isaiah said, He's with me. So whatever the outcome is here on earth pales in comparison to what it is in eternity. I've heard a pastor say once that, for non-believers, this is the best it ever gets, and for unbelievers, this is the worst it ever gets.
Okay, so this next question, I guess this would be a perfect time for this question. You, Evan Liberty, Dustin Hurd, Nicholas Slatton,
Yeah.
all received a presidential pardon from President Trump in 2020.
Yeah.
Where were you? Where were you when that happened, and what were you doing, and what was your immediate reaction?
So I was actually standing in a phone line, waiting to use a phone. It was in the days of COVID, and there were tons of lockdowns, and it was a mess. So whenever they popped the doors, you had a certain amount of time to use the computers, use the phones, take a shower, get stuff done, and then they would lock everybody back down, which we all shared the same air system, so I never understood why they were doing that, but okay, whatever. So I'm standing in line, and I hear someone come in the main door, and I hear my name being spoken by a female voice. And in a male prison, when you hear your name spoken by a female, ears perk up.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen this lady before, so I didn't know who she was. but I thought, it's mail or it's, some kind of something. But then my cellie comes up and says, hey, she's calling for your name again, go, and I'll hold your place in line. And I walk up, and she says, come on in, shut the door. And I said, with all due respect, ma'am, I can't do that. You're a female, I'm a male. You're a guard, I'm an inmate. It'd put us both at risk. And she says, no, you don't understand. And she hands me the pardon.
Oh, whoa.
And so immediately I shut the door, and of course everybody's getting around the door like, what is going on? And she's on the phone calling my wife, and I slip it outside the door to the fellas that are watching, and it was just an immediate eruption. People were, excited and banging on doors, and so she calls my wife, and she says, we need somebody here in 15 minutes to pick them up. And she hands me the phone, or I ask for the phone, I forget which. And so I grabbed the phone, and I asked her immediately, I said, is it all four of us? And she said, yeah, it's all four of you. You're all coming home. It's over with.
Whoa.
And so I give her back the phone, and she looks at me, and she says, go get your stuff. You got 10 minutes. You can't be on the compound. So I go, and I grab my stuff, and of course I'm mobbed by all the guys wondering, what's going on. And even now it's a blur of grabbing my stuff and getting out of there, and the guard that escorted me to the front, my commissary boss was standing on the concrete, and he looks at me, and I've got this bag of stuff, my books, legal work, all this, whatever. And he says, well, Slough, where are you going? And I said, it's real, Sody, it happened. We got our pardon. And he just started bawling. He picks me up and hugs me, which is a big no-no.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I said, put me down, you don't know what you're doing. He's like, no, piss on them. You guys did it, you got it, and you deserve it. And so it was a moment of validation with someone who didn't owe me that. Matter of fact, in prison context, was on the complete opposite end of where inmates stood. And
Yeah.
so it was my first reception of good job. And for me, it's one of the most overwhelming moments of my life.
I know I'm pulling your man card, but did you get emotional?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
my sister and brother-in-law picked me up. They drove me back. We made the trip from Bastrop to Denton, I think, in 2 hours and a little change. They were smoking to get back, and there's actually a video on my Facebook page of the first time I saw my daughter in months, and my wife. And we go up, we ring the doorbell. This was like midnight, I think, by the time we got there. And they'd made steaks, they'd made all kinds of stuff, right? And my favorite cake, and just stuff you'd missed. And for the first time, I looked through the glass, and my daughter and I locked eyes. And immediately I was butter.
Oh, wow.
I was butter. I picked her up, held her for the first time in almost a year. My wife as well, and it was, incredible moment.
Yeah, I mean, jeez, that's like that's just hearing you talk about it, I get chills, and listening to the heaviness of of the great news, that God interceded in that moment of your life, right?
And there were so many people involved that helped really get this issue in front of the president, because nobody has the president's cell phone. Hey, I need so-and-so.
Yeah.
Nobody has that.
Yeah.
So there were so many people involved. Dave Harrison and Eric Yasso of Harrison Spiro were really, in my view, the tip of the spear on that. And they did so much leverage, so many relationships. They wrote our briefs. It was a Herculean effort on their part to help us, who we're nobody really, right? We're John Q. Public.
And do you want to speak to other people that helped you? Do that. Yeah.
Williams and Connolly, they helped as well. The Justice for Warriors Caucus, who was most recently headed by Louis Gohmert, they amended their charter to include us for advocacy. Senator Drew Springer, who I work for currently, then Representative Parker, now Senator Parker, Representative Stuckey. There were so many House reps that signed on to a letter that was actually read in our second sentencing by the judge. He was furious that, how dare these state politicians question my court, when in reality they went line by line with all the Brady and Giglio violations that he allowed to happen and slept through a majority of them that had to be woken up for objections.
Whoa.
So
Crazy.
the pantheon is really, really big, and all the people that work so hard, and I have to give credit to my wife, who literally walked the soles off of her shoes, going up and down the halls of Congress looking for somebody to help.
Yeah.
Congressman Burgess, who was one of the first to sign on and say, I don't know how we're going to navigate this, but I'm a legislator and we can help with legislation. We can't really interfere with the judicial process, but we can help on this end. And he ended up signing the petition for the Justice for Warriors Caucus as well, for the president to consider our pardon.
When
I know I left a lot of people out because there were so many prayers, so many letters that were written to us in prison, and Drew Springer was one of my pen pals.
That's so cool, man. To have a pen pal that you're communicating with, to remind you you're not alone in this fight, in this battle, and even, just where you're at in life, you weren't ever alone, spiritually and consciously and subconsciously, you were in people's thoughts and minds and prayers. That's
one of my
amazing.
biggest mentors even now is Ed Butowski with Chapwood Investments. In my opinion, a phenomenal individual, and he has this incredible knack of connecting people.
Yeah.
Chris Peranto and myself Chris was on a Zoom, but I was in Ed's office, and Chris asked me, he said, because he helped the Benghazi guys. And so Chris is on the Zoom call, and I'm standing there, and Chris asked me, he said, Ed, what are you doing? Are you collecting Army guys to put them on your shelf or what? And of course it made Ed laugh, and again, he's just one of the kindest, gentlest patriots that genuinely cares about not only his nation, but his neighbor.
Yeah. Do you still talk to Evan, Dustin, and Nicholas?
Yeah.
Do you talk to them? When's the last? What are they up to? How are things going with them?
Everybody's going great. Nick has a brand new baby girl, recently married.
Where are they at in geography? What are they in?
So Nick is in Tennessee.
Okay.
Evan is in South America, where he loves to be. That's where he was before all this kicked off. Had successful gyms, and only came back for us. But he landed back down there. Loves it. Dustin is a windshield warrior, I call him. He's constantly on the road, constantly making things happen, and is finding success with C&G Holster Company, and doing great there.
Paul, what are you doing today? What are you doing now? What are you doing now today?
So believe it or not, the hat tip to Senator Springer, I returned back to government. And a lot of people kind of scratch their heads and say, well, wait a minute, I get the argument that, the quote, big government did this to you, but frankly, if we don't have people that are willing to serve and stand in the gap for their neighbor, especially folks that have been through the furnace, then I think that would be a missed opportunity for anyone that is really wanting to make an impact on other people's lives. As if you've been given an opportunity, which Senator Springer graciously gave to me, to come and work for his office, to shy away from that, I think would be a huge opportunity missed in the context of kingdom work. And so it's not so much a paycheck. It's not so much, what is it that gives me a title? Because titles, as as a staffer or even a legislator, really don't mean anything unless you're willing to leverage them for your constituents.
Yeah.
And so that other person on the phone line or that person standing in front of me was actually us at one time looking for help. So it's really vindicating, and it's somewhat of a form of therapy for me after all of that to say, okay, I can now leverage what I've learned to help others.
Yeah, and you're coming from a deep place too, from this personal conviction inside of you,
And on the fun side, we've got a T-shirt line now.
Yeah, that's
We've got some cigar lines.
Yeah.
a cigar line, with Payne Mason. They've really done a lot.
Come on.
To partner with us. Viciously Loyal is partnering with us
Yeah.
for our T-shirt line, and
this is T-shirt line.
we're having a lot of fun with that.
In the back it says "Faithful Few."
Yeah.
What is it? Speak to that. What do you mean? What's faithful few?
So the faithful few, for the four of us, we were offered plea deal after plea deal. We were offered immunity just to testify, and we never once took it because we weren't going to, A, admit to something we hadn't done, and two, we weren't going to testify based on the government narrative against others. And so for us, anyone who is unwilling to bend a knee to tyranny or to twist their tongue to lie is part of the faithful few. Nice. And so that's really where that came from. And it's interesting, full circle, people ask, how did you come to work for the senator? And that is probably the most interesting conversation that I have in a day.
Yeah, I bet. It's like, well, where do I begin?
Yeah, and a lot of times I'll start off with, he was my pen pal in prison, and sometimes, there's starstruck look, wait a minute, what? Yeah, but then you get into the story and it's like, oh. Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay. How do you hope your story will contribute to the broader public understanding of the complexities of private military contracting?
That's a big question. I think Eric Prince personally has done a really good job in answering that more full-throated than I can. Mm-hmm. But if I may take a little bit of liberty, where it was made abundantly clear to me, going through the legal process, laying it all on the line for people who you thought had your ultimate support. Now, if there were wrong actions taken, absolutely, hold people accountable. I'm not saying that this is a carte blanche to just go and do what you want. No, that doesn't exist. And matter of fact, this whole legal process points to the reality that we cannot bend the fabric of reality, bend the fabric of nature's law, and there not be consequences.
Yeah.
Whether it's now or 10 years from now or in eternity, there are real consequences for bending the fabric of truth and law, nature's law and God's law.
Yeah. Paul, it's a pleasure to meet you, man, and hear your
Likewise.
Amazing story of adversity, triumph, and mercy and redemption. However, so many facets. Like I said when we first started this, it was like, it's not fair to say, hey, I can pack you in this story in 1 hour. But I kind of think we did a pretty good job of getting to the true essence of your experience and who you are and what you got going on in the community, man. So it's a pleasure to meet you, an honor, a great respect, and I think you deserve a round of applause.
Oh, thank you.
Guys, that's it for the Unfinished Business Podcast, a podcast for veterans pursuing new life missions. What can we say? It's an amazing story of triumph, and I'm so blessed to know Paul today. And as I always say, guys, have peace and light in you, and remember that the ocean refuses no river.